Captain Kim Hana pressed her face against the cold viewport of the Hope's Edge, watching another massive war titan drift past like a sleeping giant. The ship's hull was torn open, revealing twisted metal corridors where thousands of brave souls, once fought for humanity's survival, now only silence filled those empty halls. Another ghost, whispered Choi Daeho from beside her. The young engineer had never seen Earth's golden age, born into a world where humans hid in the shadows of forgotten glory. His eyes held wonder mixed with sadness as he watched the enormous derelict slowly spinning in the void. The Titan fields stretched endlessly in every direction. Hundreds of massive warships floated here, each one a monument to humanity's desperate last stand against the Krillian Empire. Some ships were split completely in half, their reactor cores long cold. Others looked almost peaceful, as if their crews might wake up at any moment and return to the fight. Hana had been salvaging in these fields for 15 years, ever since she turned 18. Her father brought her here as a child, teaching her to read the scars on each hull, to understand the stories written in twisted metal and blast marks. Every ship had a tale of heroism, sacrifice, and ultimately failure. Look at the size of that one, breathed Song Minjae, pointing at a massive dreadnought drifting a kilometer away. The ship's name was barely visible through the battle damage. Eternal Storm. How many people lived on something that big? 50,000 crew, Hana replied without looking. She knew every major ship in the graveyard by heart. Admiral Yoon Sung-ho commanded her during the Battle of Proxima Gate. They held the line for 6 hours against impossible odds before the Krillians broke through. The crew fell silent. Everyone knew how that battle ended. How all the battles ended. Humanity fought with courage that shook the stars themselves, but courage alone couldn't overcome the alien empire's overwhelming numbers and superior technology. Lee Min-ho worked quietly at his sensor station, his fingers dancing across holographic displays as he mapped valuable salvage. The young man had joined Hana's crew only 6 months ago, eager to escape the overcrowded refugee stations where most humans now lived. Out here among the dead giants, he found something the stations couldn't offer: purpose. The Defiant's pride. Has some intact quantum processors in Section 7, he reported. Should fetch good money at the orbital markets. Hana nodded absently. They needed the credits desperately. The Hope's Edge was showing her age and replacement parts for human. Technology grew more expensive every year. The galaxy had moved on without humanity, and most species treated them as curiosities at best, pests at worst. Park Soo-young looked up from her repair work on the ship's atmospheric recycler. Grease stained her young face, but her eyes burned with determination. Captain, why don't we ever salvage weapons from these ships? Some of them must still work. Because weapons bring questions, Hana replied firmly. Questions we can't answer without ending up in Krillian prison ships. The Yai. Mention of prison ships made everyone uncomfortable. Stories spread through human communities about salvage crews who disappeared. Families torn apart when someone asked too many questions about the old days. The Krillian Empire allowed humans to exist, but only as long as they stayed quiet, and harmless Jung Woo-shik, the oldest crew member at 45, remembered fragments of the war from his childhood. He often stared at the war titans with haunted eyes, as if searching for ghosts of people he once knew. Today he worked on calibrating their mining lasers, preparing to cut valuable metals from dead hulls. I had an uncle who served on one of these giants, he said quietly. Never knew which one. Never found his name on any crew manifest. The Hope's Edge continued its slow journey through the graveyard. Each day brought new discoveries and new sorrows. Yesterday they found a personal data pad floating free, containing family photos and love letters that would never be delivered. Hana kept a collection of such items in her quarters, unable to throw away these final traces of lives cut short. Suddenly, Minho's sensor board erupted in flashing lights and urgent beeping sounds. His face went pale as he stared at the readings, then checked them again to be sure. Captain, he called out, his voice trembling with disbelief, I'm picking up an active signal from the deep field. It's coming from the Iron Thunder. The Bridge fell absolutely silent. Every crew member turned to stare at Minho, then at their captain. Hana felt her blood turn ice-cold at the mention of that legendary name. The Iron Thunder was more than just another war titan. It was humanity's greatest achievement, a ship so advanced that alien military analysts still studied its design. Decades later, Admiral Park Ji-soo had commanded that magnificent vessel in the final battle above Earth's moon, where humanity made its last, desperate stand. Everyone knew the story. How Admiral Park rammed the Iron Thunder into the Krillian flagship, sacrificing everything in a final act of defiance. How both ships had been completely destroyed in the explosion visible from Earth's surface. How that heroic sacrifice had bought enough time for the evacuation fleets to escape. But if the Iron Thunder was truly destroyed, what was sending that signal? The airlock hissed open with a sound that hadn't been heard in 70 years. Hana stepped into the Iron Thunder's main corridor, her boots echoing against metal floors that once rang with the footsteps of thousands of crew members. Emergency. Lighting cast eerie shadows on walls covered in blast scoring and electrical burns from the final battle. "Stay close," she whispered into her comm, leading her 5-person boarding team deeper into humanity's greatest warship. The corridors stretched, endlessly in both directions, wide enough for 10 people to walk side by side. Holographic signs flickered weakly, still trying to guide visitors to destinations that no longer mattered. Choi Dae-ho ran his scanner over the walls, amazement clear in his voice. "The hull integrity is incredible. This ship took massive damage, but somehow held together. Look at these blast patterns. They fought right here in the corridors. Scorch marks and bullet holes told the story of desperate battles fought deck by deck. In some places, emergency blast doors had sealed off damaged sections, creating tomb-like chambers where the final defenders had made their last stand. Personal belongings scattered the floor, photos, books, lucky charms that hadn't been lucky. Enough. Lee Min-ho checked his atmospheric scanner nervously. Air quality is surprisingly good. The environmental systems are still running on backup power. How is that possible after all this time? They reached a massive elevator shaft that stretched up through the ship's 30 levels. The elevator car was gone, probably destroyed in battle, but maintenance ladders still clung to the walls. One by one they climbed toward the command bridge, their helmet lights cutting through darkness that had lasted 7 decades. "I can't believe we're actually inside the Iron Thunder," whispered Song Min-jae as they climbed. "My grandfather used to tell me stories about this ship. He said it was like a floating city, complete with parks and schools for crew families." Park. So-young paused on a landing to catch her breath. Through a reinforced window, she could see into what had once been the ship's main hangar bay. Dozens of fighter craft sat in neat rows, their sleek forms covered in dust but otherwise intact. Those fighters looked brand new, like they're waiting for pilots to come back. The command bridge doors were massive slabs of reinforced metal, designed to protect the ship's nerve center from enemy boarding parties. Somehow they still had power. Red lights blinked steadily beside the entrance, and when Hana pressed her palm to the scanner, the doors groaned slowly open. Inside, the bridge was a cathedral of human engineering. Dozens of workstations surrounded a central command chair that looked more like a throne. Massive view screens covered the walls, dark now, but still reflecting their helmet lights like sleeping eyes. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, as if the crew had just stepped out for a moment, but it was the command chair that drew everyone's attention. The high-backed seat faced the main view screens, positioned so its occupant could see everything happening around the ship. Dark stains on the armrests spoke of Admiral Park's final moments, when she chose to die rather than surrender humanity's greatest weapon. Jung Woo-shik approached a nearby console with reverence. "These are the controls that coordinated humanity's entire fleet during the final battle. Admiral Park sat right here and gave the orders that saved millions of lives." Hana moved to the main terminal at the center of the bridge, her helmet light swept across keyboards and displays that had once buzzed with constant activity. Suddenly, lights began flickering to life across the bridge. Workstations hummed with returning power, and holographic displays materialized in the air. A deep voice echoed through the bridge, mechanical but somehow warm. Human voice pattern recognized. "Captain Park Ji-soo, please provide your authorization. Code for full system activation." Everyone froze. The voice came from speakers hidden throughout the bridge, surrounding them with sound that seemed to come from the ship itself. After 7 decades of silence, the Iron Thunder was speaking. "Admiral Park died in the final battle," Hana replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Captain Kim Hana. It's been 70 years since the war ended." Electronic sounds filled the bridge as the AI processed this impossible information. Lights danced across dozens of displays while the ship's computer core, buried deep in the vessel's heart, awakened from its long sleep. The sounds grew more complex, almost musical, as if the ship was singing itself back to life. Designation: Wolf 9 AI system fully operational, the voice announced after several minutes. Mission parameters unchanged. Current status: hibernation mode terminated. Awaiting orders to resume combat operations against Krillian forces. Hana felt her heart racing. The stories were true. The Iron Thunder carried one of humanity's most advanced artificial intelligences, a computer mind designed to think like the greatest military strategists in human history. But Wolf 9 didn't know the war was over. Didn't know humanity had lost. "Wolf 9, she said carefully, "what were your original orders?" Holographic displays came alive around the bridge, showing fleet formations and battle plans. Primary mission: analyze enemy tactical patterns and develop countermeasures during extended combat operations. Secondary mission: preserve human military. Knowledge for future strategic planning. Tertiary mission: await activation by human command authority for final engagement protocols. The AI's words sent chills through the boarding team. Wolf 9 hadn't just been sleeping for 70 years. It had been thinking, learning, preparing for a war that everyone else believed was over. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. "This unit requires human crew authorization for full operational capacity," Wolf 9 continued. "Most primary. Systems need extensive repairs before combat readiness can be achieved. Estimated repair time with proper resources, 6-month standard." Hana stared at Admiral Park's command chair, realizing the impossible choice before her. She could walk away, leave this sleeping giant to its dreams of battles that would never come. Or she could risk everything, her crew, her ship, maybe even what remained of humanity, to bring the Iron Thunder back to life. 3 weeks had passed since Wolf 9's awakening, and the Iron Thunder buzzed with activity like a hive coming back to life. Hana had called in every favor, spent every credit, and contacted every human salvage crew within 50 light years. Now nearly 200 people worked around the clock to restore humanity's greatest warship. In the massive engineering bay, teams of mechanics crawled through access tunnels that hadn't seen maintenance in 7 decades. Spark showers lit up the darkness as welders repaired hull breaches, while others replaced burned-out power conduits with salvaged parts from smaller war titans. The air smelled of hot metal and determination. "Reactor core is stabilizing," reported Chief Engineer Bei Junho over the ship's communication system. The grizzled veteran had served on smaller warships during the final years of the war, and seeing the Iron Thunder's massive fusion reactors come online brought tears to his eyes. Power output increasing to 30%. "We might actually pull this off." Wolf 9's voice echoed through the ship's corridors as the AI coordinated repair efforts within human precision. "Team 7, proceed to Section 12 Alpha. Hull integrity compromised in that area requires immediate attention. Team 15, excellent work on the weapons array, targeting systems coming online ahead of schedule." But it was in the ship's tactical center where Wolf 9 revealed its most precious secrets. Hana stood before massive holographic displays that showed the final battle in stunning detail. 3-dimensional representations of hundreds of ships moved through space, recreating those desperate last hours when humanity made its final stand. "Admiral Park was brilliant," Wolf 9 explained as the hologram zoomed in on Krillian fleet formations. She noticed something that other human commanders missed. "Watch carefully." The display showed massive Krillian dreadnoughts arranged in complex, geometric patterns, their smaller escort ships forming protective screens around command vessels. At first glance, the formation looked impenetrable, overlapping shields and concentrated firepower that had crushed every human fleet that challenged it. See how their command ships stay in the center. Wolf 9 highlighted specific vessels in the formation. Each one controls exactly 47 escort vessels through quantum communication links. But Admiral Park discovered something remarkable. During the battle, the hologram fast-forwarded to show human fighters diving through the Krillian formation. Most were destroyed instantly, but a few managed to damage specific escort ships on the formation's edge. Suddenly, entire sections of the enemy fleet began moving erratically, their coordination breaking down. The Krillians built their command. Structure for efficiency, not flexibility, Wolf 9 continued. Remove exactly 12 escort ships from precise positions, and their quantum communication network collapses into chaos. The formation becomes vulnerable for approximately 4 minutes before they can re-establish control. Hannah stared at the tactical data, understanding flooding through her mind. Admiral Park figured this out during the battle. That's why she ordered the ramming attack, not just to damage their flagship, but to create the chaos needed to exploit this weakness. Correct. Unfortunately, the Admiral died before she could share this information with other human commanders. The knowledge remained locked in my memory banks, waiting for someone to unlock it. The tactical implications were staggering. If Wolf 9 was right, human forces could potentially defeat Krillian fleets many times their size by targeting specific weak points in enemy formations. But they would need to test this theory, and that meant fighting. Suddenly, alarm klaxons began wailing throughout the ship. Wolf 9's voice took on an urgent tone that made everyone stop what they were doing. All personnel to stations. Long-range sensors have detected incoming Krillian signatures. Multiple contacts approaching from Vector 77 Mark IV. In the communications center, Lee Minho's face went pale as he processed the sensor data. Captain, I'm reading 15 ships minimum. They're moving in standard Krillian patrol formation, but they're heading straight for the outer colonies. The bridge filled with tension as key personnel rushed to their stations. Through the main view screen, they could see the distant flicker of hyperspace exits as alien ships dropped back into normal space near human settlements that had lived in peace for 70 years. They're not expecting any resistance, observed Lieutenant Commander Oseojin, a former military officer who had joined the repair effort. Look at their approach vector. No scouts, no advanced screening. They think humanity is completely broken. Wolf 9. Processed incoming data streams with mechanical efficiency. Analysis confirms Krillian expansion fleet conducting standard pacification sweep. Estimated strength, 1 heavy cruiser, 14 escort vessels. Mission parameters suggest they intend to establish permanent occupation of human colonies. The news got worse as more reports came in. Across the galaxy, hidden human outposts were receiving similar visits from Krillian forces. After 70 years of quiet coexistence, the alien empire had decided to finish what they started. Humanity's remaining colonies would become slave worlds, their populations put to work serving alien masters. But something else was happening. Among the stars, deep space monitoring stations, refugee ships, and hidden settlements began picking up a signal they hadn't heard in 7 decades. The Iron Thunder's identification beacon was broadcasting again, its unique frequency cutting through space like a sword of light. On a mining station near the Centauri system, an old woman named Han Mirai pressed her face against a porthole as she watched her scanner display. She had been barely 20 when the war ended, young enough to remember the Iron Thunder's final battle. Now, impossibly, that legendary ship was calling out to anyone who could hear. "It's real," she whispered, tears streaming down her weathered face. "The Thunder lives." Similar scenes played out across dozens of human settlements. Young people who had only heard stories suddenly understood that their parents' tales of heroes and legendary ships weren't just myths. Somewhere out there, humanity's greatest weapon had awakened from its long sleep. Emergency communications networks, unused for decades, crackled back to life. Colony governors contacted each other in secret. Retired military officers dusted off old uniforms. Civilian pilots checked their ships' weapon systems for the first time in years. Hope, that most dangerous of human emotions, began spreading like wildfire through communities that had accepted defeat as permanent. The Krillians were coming back to finish their conquest, But this time humanity had something they didn't expect. They had the Iron Thunder. And more importantly, they had Wolf Nine's knowledge of how to hurt the aliens who had stolen their future. In Dashim, the tactical center, Hana watched the approaching enemy fleet with cold determination. Wolf 9, how long until we can test Admiral Park's theory? Current repair status allows for limited combat operations, the AI replied. Weapon systems at 60% capacity, shields functional but not optimal. However, the opportunity to field test the Admiral's tactical discovery may not come again. Hana looked around the bridge at faces filled with fear and hope in equal measure. Some of these people were too young to remember the war. Others were too old to fight another one. But all of them understood that this moment would decide humanity's future among the stars. The first ship arrived just 2 days after the Iron Thunder's signal reached the outer colonies. It was barely more than a modified cargo hauler, its hull patched with mismatched metal plates and held together by determination. But when Captain Yu Jihan stepped onto the Iron Thunder's massive hangar deck, his weathered face carried the same expression Hana had seen in every mirror, the look of someone who refused to give up. I brought 47 people, and whatever weapons we could scrape together, he told Hana as they walked through corridors now bustling with activity. Most of them are farmers and miners, but they all volunteered when they heard the Thunder was back. Within a week, the Titan fields looked like a refugee camp in space. Ships of every size and description anchored themselves around the massive war Titan. Ancient freighters whose engines wheezed with age, sleek racing yachts converted into makeshift fighters, even a few civilian transports stuffed with families who had nowhere else to go. In the Iron Thunder's main conference room, Hana faced the impossible task of organizing chaos into something resembling a fleet. The table was surrounded by ship captains whose vessels represented humanity's last hope, and they were a motley collection indeed. I've got 30 fighters, but half of them don't have working weapons, reported Captain Shin Hyejin, a young woman who commanded a squadron of modified racing ships. My pilots are good, but they've never seen real combat. Old Colonel Nam Tai-ho, who had arrived with an ancient patrol boat and a crew of military veterans, shook his head grimly. The Krillians are bringing a full conquest armada, 300 ships including heavy battle cruisers, with shields that can deflect anything we throw at them. The reports kept coming, each one painting a bleaker picture. Humanity could muster perhaps 50 ships total, most of them civilian vessels with improvised weapons. Against them came the full might of the Krillian Empire's expansion fleet, warships designed to crush entire worlds into submission. But in the depths of the Iron Thunder, Wolf 9 was revealing capabilities that had been hidden for 7 decades. In massive weapon bays that stretched for kilometers, automated systems were assembling devices that looked like nothing humanity had ever built before. These are the Admiral's final projects, Wolf 9 explained to the assembled engineers. Holographic blueprints showed weapons that combined human ingenuity with alien technology, captured during the war. Quantum disruptor missiles designed to exploit weaknesses in Krillian shield harmonics, plasma cannons that fire concentrated stellar material, and this, the AI's presentation shifted to show a sleek fighter craft unlike anything in human history. Its hull seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy, and weapon ports glowed within a fire. The Thunder-class interceptor. Admiral Park designed these to be piloted by volunteers, willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Each one carries enough firepower to damage ships 10 times their size. Young pilot Kim Do-yeon stepped forward, her eyes bright with determination. At 19, she had never seen the war, but stories of humanity's heroes burned in her heart like stars. How many can you build? 12 prototypes are nearly complete. They require pilots with exceptional skill and absolute courage. The survival rate in combat will be approximately 15%. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Wolf 9 was saying. These new fighters were suicide ships designed for pilots willing to die if it meant hurting the enemy. But when Do-yeon raised her hand to volunteer, 11 other young pilots immediately followed. Throughout the growing fleet, similar scenes played out. Engineers worked around the clock to install weapon systems salvaged from the War Titan graveyard. Former soldiers trained civilian volunteers in combat tactics they hoped never to use. Families said goodbye to each other, knowing that many would not survive what was coming. The Iron Thunder itself was transforming. Gun ports that had been sealed for 70 years opened like awakening eyes. Missile bays loaded with warheads designed by humanity's greatest military minds. Shield generators hummed with power that could protect cities. But the ship's greatest weapon was Wolf 9 itself. The AI had spent 7 decades analyzing every battle of the war, studying captured Krillian technology and developing tactics specifically designed to counter alien advantages. Now it shared this knowledge with every ship in the human fleet. "Your vessels are small and fast," Wolf 9 explained during a fleet-wide briefing. "The enemy expects overwhelming firepower to win quickly. Instead, you will be swift shadows, striking from unexpected angles. Each attack must be precisely timed to exploit the weaknesses Admiral Park discovered." On the bridge of the Iron Thunder, Hana watched long-range sensors as the Krillian armada approached. 300 ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the arrogance of conquerors who had never known defeat. At their head flew the command dreadnought Void Crusher, a ship so massive it carried more firepower than entire human battle groups. "They're not even trying to hide," observed Lieutenant Commander Park Sung-jae, studying the enemy formation. "No scouts, no advance guard. They think this will be a simple mop-up operation." Wolf 9's tactical displays showed the approaching armada in terrifying detail. Each Krillian ship was larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had ever built. Their shields could absorb massive punishment, and their weapons could vaporize cities. By every logical calculation, the human fleet should surrender or flee. But logic had never been humanity's strongest trait. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Lee Hyunwoo from his station, "I'm receiving messages from across the fleet. Every ship is reporting ready for battle." Hana looked around her bridge at faces filled with fear and determination in equal measure. Some of these people were veterans who remembered the war's horrors. Others were young volunteers who had never seen combat, but all of them shared the same stubborn refusal to kneel before their conquerors. Through the main view screen, she could see the lights of 50 human ships scattered around the Iron Thunder, like stars around a giant planet. Each one represented families, dreams, and the desperate hope that humanity's story wouldn't end in chains. "Signal the fleet," she commanded, her voice carrying across the ship's communication system to every human vessel in the Titan fields. "All ships prepare for combat. Today we find out if overwhelming odds can break the human spirit." The response came back from 50 ships in a chorus of determination that would have made Admiral Park proud. Across the fleet, weapons powered up, shields activated, and pilots strapped themselves into cockpits for what might be their final flight. Humanity's greatest test was about to begin. The Krillian armada emerged from hyperspace like a storm of metal and death. 300 warships dropped into normal space at the edge of the Titan fields, their hulls gleaming with the cold light of distant stars. At their head, the massive dreadnought Void Crusher stretched nearly 15 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with enough weapons to glass entire planets. Admiral Zekthor stood on his command bridge, 6 arms folded behind his back as he surveyed the human graveyard before them. The insectoid aliens' compound eyes glittered with satisfaction. 70 years ago, these dead ships had given his people trouble. Now they were nothing but scrap metal floating uselessly in space. "Begin the advance," he commanded, his voice a harsh clicking sound that translated through the ship's systems. Standard conquest formation, minimal resistance expected from surviving human settlements. But as the Krillian fleet moved deeper into the Titan fields, something impossible happened. The dead ships around them began to wake up. The Iron Thunder rose from the shadow of a massive derelict, like a sleeping giant coming to life. Her hull, scarred by 70 years of battle damage, suddenly blazed with light as weapon systems that had slept since the final battle powered up with frightening speed. Gun ports opened like awakening eyes and missile tubes loaded with ammunition designed by humanity's greatest minds. "Contact," reported Sensor Officer Yoon Minju from the Iron Thunder's bridge. "Krillian fleet at full strength, 300 ships in standard expansion formation." Hana stood at the center of her bridge, surrounded by displays showing every human ship in the growing fleet. 50 vessels against 300. Odds that would make sane people surrender. But humanity had never been particularly sane. "Wolf 9, initiate fleet network," she commanded. Across the human fleet, every ship's computer suddenly connected to a tactical network that turned individual vessels into parts of a single, deadly organism. Fighter pilots found their targeting, systems enhanced beyond anything they had ever experienced. Gunners discovered their weapons automatically adjusting for maximum effectiveness. Ship captains received tactical data that let them see the entire battle from a god's eye view. "Network established," Wolf 9 announced, its voice echoing through every human vessel. "All ships now operating under unified command protocol. Admiral Park's tactical analysis uploaded to all units." The first Krillian scouts entered the debris field, expecting to find only salvage crews and terrified civilians. Instead, they flew into a carefully prepared trap. Human fighters, hidden among the derelict war titans, erupted from concealment like deadly wasps from their nest. Young pilot Kim Doyen led her squadron of Thunder-class interceptors in the opening attack. Her fighter, barely larger than an atmospheric craft, danced between massive pieces of debris, while targeting systems guided by Wolf 9's tactical network painted enemy weak points on her display. "Fox 1, Fox 1, she called out as quantum disruptor. Missiles streaked from her ship toward a Krillian cruiser. The alien vessel's shields flared as the weapons struck, but these weren't ordinary human missiles. They carried 70 years of accumulated knowledge about Krillian defensive systems. The cruiser's shields collapsed in a cascade of brilliant energy, leaving its hull exposed to follow-up attacks from other human fighters. Within seconds, the first enemy ship died in a ball of fire that lit up the debris field like a newborn star. Admiral Zekthor's confidence evaporated as reports flooded his command center. "Impossible. Human fighters are using weapons we've never seen before. How are they coordinating so precisely?" The answer became clear as the Iron Thunder moved into the open, no longer hiding among the derelicts. The massive war titan accelerated with surprising grace for something so large, its hull bristling with weapons that had been upgraded far beyond their original specifications. "All ships, execute Park Protocol Omega," Hana commanded, her voice carrying across the tactical network to every human vessel. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. The human fleet, guided by Wolf 9's perfect tactical coordination, struck at the Krillian formation with surgical precision. They didn't attack randomly or rely on overwhelming firepower. Instead, they targeted exactly 12 specific escort ships positioned at critical points in the enemy formation. Captain Shin Hyejin led her racing yacht squadron in a suicidal dive through the heart of the Krillian fleet. Her ships, small and fast, slipped between the massive alien vessels like minnows swimming between sharks. Plasma cannons fired from hidden positions, striking the designated targets with pinpoint accuracy. As the targeted escort ships exploded, something remarkable happened to the Krillian formation. The remaining ships began moving erratically, their perfect coordination breaking down as quantum communication links collapsed. Suddenly, 300 ships became a confused mob of individual vessels, each one fighting without support from its neighbors. "Now!" Hana shouted. "All ships, full attack!" The Iron Thunder led the charge, its massive guns firing salvos that lit up space like a thunderstorm. Behind it came every human ship in the fleet. Civilian transports with improvised weapons, ancient patrol boats crewed by veterans, racing ships flown by teenagers who had never seen war but refused to live as slaves. The battle became a hurricane of light and destruction. Krillian ships designed to fight in coordinated formations found themselves helpless when forced to operate alone. Human fighters, guided by Wolf 9's tactical genius, struck at weak points with devastating effectiveness. Admiral Zekthor watched his perfect armada dissolve into chaos. Ships that should have been invincible were exploding under attacks from vessels they could have crushed individually. But the humans weren't fighting individually. They were fighting as a single organism, directed by an intelligence that anticipated every move before it happened. "Retreat," he finally commanded, his voice breaking with disbelief. "All ships withdraw immediately." But it was too late. The human fleet had surrounded the Krillian formation, turning the debris field into a trap that closed from all sides. Ship after ship died in brilliant explosions, as quantum disruptor missiles found their marks and plasma cannons carved through hulls that had seemed invincible. When the Void Crusher finally exploded, its destruction lit up the entire Titan. Fields like a second sun. The massive dreadnought broke apart in slow motion, its hull splitting along fault lines as internal explosions tore it apart from within. The battle lasted only 4 hours, but when it ended, the Krillian armada was nothing but expanding clouds of debris. 300 ships had entered the Titan fields in perfect formation, none left alive. On the bridge of the Iron Thunder, Hana watched as long-range sensors confirmed what seemed impossible. They had won. Not just survived, but achieved total victory against odds that should have guaranteed their destruction. "Wolf 9, she said quietly, "send a message to every human settlement in the galaxy. Tell them the Iron Thunder lives and we're coming home." The AI's response carried a note of satisfaction that seemed almost human. "Message transmitted, Admiral, and might I add, Admiral Park would be proud." Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity's greatest warship had returned from the dead, leading a fleet that had achieved the impossible. The species that had hidden in shadows for 70 years was suddenly revealed as the galaxy's most dangerous predators, angry and united, behind their legendary War Titan. In the depths of the Titan fields, other War Titans began receiving Wolf 9's activation codes. One by one, humanity's greatest weapons stirred from their long sleep, ready to reclaim what had been lost. Admiral Kim Hana stood on her bridge as the Iron Thunder led a growing fleet toward Krillian space. Behind them, the graveyard of humanity's former glory was becoming something new, a staging ground for the greatest military comeback in galactic history. Humanity's age of hiding was over. Their age of reclamation had begun. The end.